Okay, I decided to go just with voiceover today because sometimes when I use the camera on my laptop, it slows things down. So let me know what you think about that in the comments below. If you like to have a face with the voice or if the voice is just fine, my voiceover type of situation. But here's Dr. Michael Vlach, formerly a professor at the Master's Seminary. So Dr. Vlach taught systematic theology there at the Master's Seminary. John MacArthur affiliated seminary, or the seminary that he started. But he's answering the question, what is dispensational? What is dispensationalism? And he says, Dr. Vlach says, one of the fundamental issues is, or assertions that dispensationalists will make, is that the church did not exist in the Old Testament. The church begins in the New Testament. Only in the New Testament did the church ever exist. So the church did not exist in the Old Testament. Again, that's Dr. Michael Vlach. The problem with this is, being from a covenant theology perspective myself as a Calvinist, the problem with saying that is that Stephen refutes this. Stephen in Acts chapter 7 refutes this nonsense. Because, let me scroll up to Acts chapter 7, Stephen's speech, of course, Stephen's speech, given in the form of a covenantal lawsuit against unbelieving Jews of his day. So he goes through all this church history. Church history matters to Stephen. And this is a church history that he's going through. But notice down in verse 38. Okay, so just to get the context, he's talking about Moses, whom they rejected, saying, "Who made you a ruler and a judge over us?" This man, Moses, God sent as both ruler and redeemer by the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush. This man led them out, performing wonders and signs in Egypt and at the Red Sea in the wilderness for 40 years. This is the Moses who said to the Israelites, "God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brothers." This is the one who was in the congregation, right here, the word congregation, in the wilderness with the angel who spoke to him at Mount Sinai. This word congregation is church. It's church. And I would say that the ESV did not do a particularly good job there by translating as congregation, because here is the KJV. So the King James, Acts chapter 7, verse 38. This is the proper translation right here. This is he that was in the church in the wilderness. The church in the wilderness. That word there is ekklēsia, and it does mean church. Okay, it means church. And he's talking about the time of Moses, the Old Testament. So this is incorrect. The church did exist in the Old Testament, just as much as it exists in the New Testament and all of church history from the time of Christ and the apostles. It's the same church. Second of all, if we go to, Galatians 3, Ephesians 2, but let's go to Revelation chapter 12. I'll just stop by quick Galatians chapter 3 and the exalted language that Paul uses here of all believers in the gospel of Christ. In Christ Jesus, you are all sons of God. And he talks about sons of Abraham. If you are Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring and heirs according to the promise made to Abraham, the Abrahamic covenant. The law of Moses did not annul the covenant that was made unto Abraham, was Paul's whole argument there. The sons of we all once lived as sons of disobedience, but God being rich in mercy, that is grace, that is sola gratia, grace alone right there. Let's go here to Ephesians chapter 2, 11 through 22. You were alienated from the citizenship of Israel, politeios, the political body, the body of citizens. You were alienated from the body of citizens of Israel. But now, in Christ, you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens. Sum polites, fellow citizens, the citizen body, and all being joined together, you are an holy temple in the Lord, a temple. The temple is a reference to the church. Just like it is in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, when it is said the man of sin, son of perdition, sits in the temple of God. That means he sits in the church of Christ, claiming himself to be God. That is found, of course, in the papacy, the papal antichrist. But here's Revelation chapter 12. This should seal the whole deal right here. About Israel, the church, Israel. They're synonymous. This woman clothed with the sun, moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. This woman is Israel right here. See, the imagery here is taken from Genesis chapter 37, verses 9 through 11. The woman represents all the sons of Israel and Jacob in totality. That's what Genesis 37 is talking about. And Revelation chapter 12, Jesus is using the same imagery. Let me scroll back down to, oh boy, it brought me all the way back up to the top. So I got to scroll. Bear with. This woman is Israel, who brings forth the male child. She gave birth to a male child, and her child, that is the Messiah, this is the first advent of Christ, was raptured up to God and to his throne. The word harpazo is rapture. They mean the same thing, caught up to God and to his throne. This is the saints will be caught up to God at the second advent of Christ. But the woman fled into the wilderness. Remember what Stephen just said? This was the church in the wilderness. Here's this woman is the church in the wilderness. But notice, for 1260 days, meaning 1260 literal years, day equals year principle in historicism, this is the same woman. The same woman here is in the prophecy. It's not a different woman. It's the same woman. This woman clothed with the sun, Israel, also known as the church of the Old Testament. This woman is the church of the New Testament Christian church. And this 1260 years did not begin until after the fall of the Roman Empire. So it is, in fact, the Christian church, the woman who flees into the wilderness. Okay, so this is absolutely incorrect. The church did not exist in the Old Testament. Absolutely it did. It existed all the way when God first made skins to cover our first parents, Adam and Eve, after they had sinned. They made their own fig leaves. They just tried to come up with their own religion to cover their unrighteousness, to cover their wickedness, their sinfulness. That's what fallen man does. He creates his own religion to try to establish his own righteousness. That's why Christianity is Christocentric. We have no righteousness in and of ourselves. It's his, right? But Genesis chapter 3, as soon as God gives that evangel, that good news that the seed of the woman shall crush the head of the serpent, of the seed of the serpent, but bruise his heel in the process. That's the proto-evangelion, the first announcement of the gospel, Genesis 3:15. Okay? They're the church. Adam and Eve were the church, the first members of his church, the first justified ones, because God himself made them skins to cover their sinfulness, the prefigurement of all the Old Testament sacrifices. And then, of course, the fulfillment in the atonement, the propitiatory sacrifice of Christ, solus Christus. It is Christocentric. All of these shadows and types are all Christocentric. That was the church who believed all those things. Abraham, who believed God, etc. So the church absolutely did exist in the Old Testament, as the Bible lays out clearly. Let me know what you think in the comments down below about all that. There's so much more we can get into as far as depth, but I wanted to keep this fairly short. We'll talk to you soon. Soli Deo Gloria.